Yeah, it seems like we're on. All right, so we will open the March 13th meeting of the Riverfront Advisory Committee. So present is Joe Lamatena, myself, Sam Kenny, and Dale Pike. Absent Mike Hoffman and Ingrid Alberg. Any comment from the public? Or just here to listen. Okay. So let's start with the minutes from last meeting, February 13th. So Dale, I know you had one comment.
Right. The regional town planner is Kyle. The last name is, I believe it's Pimental.
Kyle, K-Y-L-E?
Yes.
And how do you spell that?
Pimental.
P-I-M-E-A-N-T?
E-N-T-A-L.
E-N-T-A-L. And I had one comment as well of technically Chris Blackstone and Colin Lawson, who attended last meeting, they're members of Conservation Commission, and where it was technically a posted meeting for us, I think they were primarily there as Concom members rather than members of the public. This is like an extreme nitpick, but I'm not sure if we need to identify them as being Conservation Commission members, since it was technically a posted meeting and they were there
So
under that guise.
Add Conservation Commission.
Yeah, I would probably just add a tag to them, since they're both involved with the commission and we're there under that guise.
It was Chris and who else?
Colin Lawson.
How do you spell the last name?
Lawson. I thought he was on your list.
Lawson.
Thought he was on the list. Hold on. Maybe I'm making that up. So yeah, that would be the only other thing. Oh yeah, gotcha. All right, I'm mixing two things up in my head. So yeah, the two of them were here for that meeting, but were Conservation Commission members attending kind of in a joint meeting, I guess. Gotcha.
So I've changed Todd Maxwell to Kyle Pimental. I've added Conservation Commission members. The president is Chris Blackstone and Colin Lawson.
Yep.
And I changed the word Todd to Kyle everywhere that I thought.
All right, perfect. No other comments. So I would make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
And I'll second. All those in favor?
Okay. Nice. So just one update I wanted to give to the two of you, because I know this has come up a few times in this forum, but the Lamprey River watershed bacterial testing that Dr. Steve Jones with UNH is doing. He actually gave a presentation to us at the Conservation Commission on Thursday night, which was great, because I know I've seen the result of that report, but it's kind of dense.
Yeah.
So it was great to kind of get it right from the horse's mouth and a little bit more succinct summary of it. So just kind of a few takeaways. Obviously that work is being funded by the Lamprey River Advisory Committee, really with the goals of expanding the available data set and kind of monitor bacteria in general areas within the Lamprey River watershed. I thought it was really interesting to have locations from Newmarket, but also like all the way out to Raymond. I think they had one in Epping and one in Lee as well. But that was interesting to see. They will be kind of doing additional work this year 2023. But you know, let's see, what else did I take away from it? Kind of some obvious stuff, but that they think there's a correlation with stormwater runoff increasing bacteriological content within the watershed. One thing they noted was in all the data that they had collected the last 2 years that they didn't actually have a lot of sample dates directly after like rainfall events, and they wanted to make a better point of doing that this time around to better prove out that theory. I think it's a pretty safe one to make, but they didn't have.
That's kind of standard the way it works.
They didn't have actual kind of dry / right after rainfall wet data to actually compare and definitively go, yep, is what's happening. So I know that was kind of a stated goal this time around. But he gave us a walkthrough of some of what they're doing with the microbial source tracking and just kind of looking at different points, different kind of data sets, and seeing, is this from horses, is it from dogs, is it from humans, all that. So the data set was pretty interesting. A lot of them were common, but kind of some of the main takeaway I think for us and the focus of the stuff that we've talked about is 6 of the 8 sample dates they had exceeded or significantly exceeded the threshold for human bacteria at the Moonlight Brook outfall, which we've kind of touched on a few times. But yeah, 6 of the 8 points exceeded it, and some of them were like wildly over the threshold.
But Moonlight Brook, does all the water that goes into that is all Newmarket, right? Or is it,
Yes.
Does it? Okay.
So Moonlight Brook is strictly within the town of Newmarket, the entire watershed, the brook and all of its watershed contribution.
I think it's safe to say that the expectation would be, I mean, in any situation like this where you have, it's pretty wooded. What little brook there is up above the athletic fields area is pretty wooded. And where it's highly wooded, a lot of times that will kind of clean the water in and of itself. So this is most likely something to do, it's either something to do with some unexpected hookup or discharge that's going on, or some failure to separate stormwater and sewer. Something is going on with that, and it may not. I think the unanswered part of that, and correct me, was whether this is going to be something. It's a fairly minor contamination, so if the culvert was no longer stagnant, if that little backup behind the culvert, if it stopped being stagnant, would the contamination that's going on be so minor that you wouldn't see anything? Or is there something up there that needs to be found?
And that's going to be a primary goal of their 2023 work. Is they're going to do some more in-depth follow-up with Moonlight Brook specifically to try to figure out a little bit more pointed where it's coming, or at least what point the introduction is. Obviously, some interesting parts with, the Creighton Street pump station and the septage receiving basically being right there. But the Moonlight Culvert outfall into the Lamprey, and just all the different parts in general, some of it being kind of underground under the bowl area. But I did offer to Dr. Jones to get in touch when they were looking to start, since I live right next to those woods and I'm extremely familiar with all of it. So I think Lindsay and I are potentially going to meet with him when he wants to get going and talk about spots he can access and things.
Are they sharing that with Sean, the environmental department?
I think it has been in the past. I don't know if he's aware of the new work that's coming. I'm not sure of the exact extent. I won't speak for
I
him.
feel like Sean, my feeling was that he wasn't at this point. He was involved back when, so he has a lot of experience. He understands how the separation went. I think it needs more data before I have talked to him about the fact that there's human contamination in those waters, and he's just saying that's that is challenging work, especially since so much of that area is underground.
Yeah.
I think Lindsay, we've got the right person. Between Sean and Lindsay, we've got good expertise within the town, and we've talked about it here. There's a plan in place that is going to do things that should resolve the situation.
The only thing I want to add is they've been taking some additional waste into the Creighton Street plant. Okay, Sean has been given some money. They're working on expanding the Young's, the plant down there, so that the treatment or the waste that they're currently taking into Creighton will now go somewhere else. And I just wonder if maybe there's some runoff coming.
I'm unfamiliar. What is this Creighton Street plant?
Yeah, down just south of Shanda Park, there's like a brick building right on the river. So that's the Creighton Street pump station. So it's a wastewater lift station, but it also is currently where the town receives septage.
Okay.
So like people from like RVs and stuff will deposit there. Sean's plan, has been to relocate that to the plant, but right now it is at that location.
But all of that, none of that should be contributing to what's going on in Moonlight Brook.
I don't know. They're backing trucks into the air, and who knows what's coming off the.
Yeah.
Exactly. Theoretically, no, and not even saying it. So that's part of this goal. Is we know basically through the watershed there is some presence of bacteria at this outfall. It is very high. So, okay, is it a problem somewhere in Moonlight Brook? What's going on? So I think that's the goal of this data.
I mean, the good news, as far as I'm concerned at this point, is we have a plan in place to do something about it. It's not.
There's a plan.
We're not going to renovate the park
Until we do that,
and leave that unresolved.
I still don't feel comfortable that we know what it is. We know we want to do something, but what is it that we're going to do?
But that's going to be one of the things that's included in the H&H study we're talking about. We're putting the funding together. All of those things are lined up, and and it's also tied in with the same questions around stormwater, and a lot of things are going to be further resolved in the Moonlight Brook process, and we're so much better resourced to try to deal with that as a town since Lindsay came on board than we were before. So
definitely,
I'm very satisfied.
That guy Bart hasn't been doing much. Huh?
He did look like he had something to say earlier, though. What was it? Good. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm mostly regurgitating stuff from the Conservation Commission meeting, but I was very happy personally to hear there was a plan to investigate Moonlight Brook specifically a little bit more about where is this problem, if frankly it's occurring along Moonlight Brook, where is it maybe occurring, and that does seem to be a focus of the 2023 work. So.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to hear that you and Lindsay are going to connect with him. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to offer to let him park at my house if he wants, because really you can just walk into it right there.
Right,
so.
Right, and to get sort of this whole thing understood. It like I say, it could be as simple. I mean, I think we're pretty well committed down the road that those culverts are going to change, and that may make it a lot better, and that would be great. But
yeah, definitely. It's just something I know we've talked about, and we definitely focused on, I guess, a longer term solution to the engineering part of Moonlight Brook with the H&H study and all that, but we hadn't really come back to the bacteria testing angle in a while. So again, was happy to hear that there was a plan and more information to follow on that.
Because I don't know what right now a lot of it is just hidden, so it's, but the fact he's getting more information at more data points along up there, can say, well, the problem exists well upstream, and it will be handy to have all that information. It's really good. So
agreed. So again, sorry I've been a little bit scattered and kind of failed to actually put out an agenda beforehand again here. But one of the items I did have on it was any update on coastal resilience grant. So It literally like just got posted today.
Like probably 10 minutes before the meeting.
Nice.
So
They were in my head.
yeah, so it came out, just some highlights. You could do design. So I think what's applicable for our situation is design projects. And I'm just going to read this verbatim. Design projects seek to advance design site-specific for site-specific physical resources or assets that will increase community and habitat resilience. Design project should result in a collaboratively developed design product that can be considered for funding opportunities that support final design, permitting, and construction. So later on it goes down and says, coastal resiliency grant funds may not be used for design new hardened shoreline structures, for example, riprap seawalls or revetments, but may be used to design nature-based shoreline stabilization projects and mimic the natural environment, improve ecosystem functioning and value compared to current conditions, and consider future conditions. And then, so the CRG funds can be may be used to complete up to 75% engineering design, but cannot support final engineering.
Okay.
So
Okay.
What's that mean, can't support final engineering?
So it can go towards like a preliminary design, the way I'm reading it. But a preliminary design would be once that's done, and maybe there's an extra step after that, final design, which is more refined, more specific, and can't be used towards that. But I think there's other opportunities, other grants out there that we can go after that'll help with final design.
Agreed. And I know that kind of what we collectively, the town, had received through the Great Bay Living Shoreline program. I think they referred to that deliverable as potentially a 50% design. I am less versed in, I guess, like landscape architecture stuff. So you need to speak at the mic. Breaking the rules. I'm more, I guess, versed in like engineering design than architecture or landscape architecture design, but I feel like what the town received through the grant project was very preliminary, like very conceptual, and like not particularly like design based. So I still think there's a lot of work that could be done to advance a design from what we've received to date to even the 75% level.
So it's a 4-to-1 match.
Okay.
Just curious, is there any reason, since we have all the room and there's microphones here, could you come up here? Is there anything that,
I could if you want. I just
it would be
fine,
great
right?
as far as I'm concerned, if
Okay.
you just came up here and sat next to a microphone.
be right there.
We're not that numerous.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the
And
etiquettes
it's give you
are,
room
but
to
that
spread
seems to
out your
make sense.
paper and it easier, so. We're not all that formal here anyway, so.
No.
Okay. Alright, so, I was kind of thinking along the lines, how do we combine grants? I was talking to Lindsay earlier today, and based on another conversation I had with Conservation Chair, another member, Tom Jones, we had with Southeast Land Trust. We're talking about, how do we find all these grants? I mean, this is based on the last meeting that we have, like create a timeline where all these grant opportunities and how they can be used and paired potentially. I was talking to Lindsay today about ARM grants, so it's aquatic resource mitigation. And I was thinking about Moonlight Brook because ARM grants allow for final design, pay for that. But Lindsay was of the opinion that it might not score well because they're looking typically for more larger restoration projects. But I was wondering maybe we could explore that a little further because maybe there's opportunity here to do something a little different where it's an urban environment. And so I'll talk to Lindsay a little more about that and see if maybe we can reach out to the grant management team at DES to see, just to have a preliminary conversation. Hey, look, this is what we're kind of thinking of pairing, and this is our timeline. do you see this as feasible, or would it score well? So at the next meeting, we'll have an update on that. Just see, how are we moving forward? So, but I think we do have an opportunity here, Coastal Resiliency Grant. Like I said earlier, it's a 4-to-1 grant match. We can apply up to $70,000. Minimum is $10,000. It's a 12 to 18 month deadline. So,
So when is that, can anybody refresh me, because I'm looking and it wasn't here, we were talking about, this is the next grant we talked about when
Yes.
we were talking with Kyle.
Yep, that's correct.
Yes.
And then we were also, the public hearing focus grants that you were talking about were things that were gonna be like October, November.
That's correct. Yep.
And was the H&H funding, where was that coming for the, we didn't have to do we had an H&H already, but we needed to do an update one, a dated one. Was that someplace that Lindsay had an eye on grant funding for, or is that?
Yeah, I think she was looking. I wasn't sure if it was. I think we need more clarification. If it was coastal resiliency would help with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remind myself
Yeah.
of that too. And I had written that the Coastal Resilience Grant and the Clean Water SRF come like June would be kind of focusing on Moonlight Brook and the stormwater aspects.
Right.
So that may have been where we had settled collectively last time.
Yeah, because I think for the next meeting, it would be good for this to be clear enough so Joe gets it in the minutes, so that we kind of lay out what our thinking is about where our grant opportunities are in our deadline.
So there's an informational session on the 20th on this grant. So I'm going to attend that. I'm sure Lindsay will too. So one of us will, or both, and then we'll have more guidance on what will be eligible. But if anything, if our H&H study, let's say hypothetically, can't be funded through this, it's a good opportunity for a living shoreline too.
Yeah.
For advanced design.
Yeah.
Preliminary design.
To fund that through this.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
As long as we're targeting something.
Right, and then we'd have to understand from Lindsay, just to clarify if it can't be funded through this, where it will be, because that needs, I'm sure it's in her plans to move that along and get it.
Yep.
It's not a full new H&H, it's just an updating, but it's the Moonlight Brook thing kind of outlines that we need, that plans have to kind of be running in parallel to what we're trying to do here, right?
Right, because I can see like the two are connected, where you want to understand what that culvert is, and then once we know that it's failing, or if it is failing, then how do we tie that into the living shoreline? That design.
Right.
So
Because there were elements of that.
because they're connected.
Right,
Yeah.
and there was quite a bit of space. I think if we had a generous box culvert, whatever, that connected that area down through, they said that in effect could become some of the living shoreline vegetation could migrate up there, which would be great,
And that's why I really need to go to that informational session, because what I'm reading here is the funds cannot be used to design hardened shoreline structures, ripraps, seawalls, or revetments. So, does a culvert like a larger culvert qualify as that, a hardened structure, or could it be used towards something else?
Yeah, because when we had the living shorelines meetings, and I think all of us that were there would know that a fairly significant part of that conversation, they really were very interested in seeing, it's an urban setting for a living shoreline. So you start with the fact that you need to adapt what's there and is hardened. We're not trying to make it harder. We're trying to adapt what's there, because we can't give up the park.
Yeah.
That's not what's going to happen. What you're trying to do is create an area that nature can say migrate up Moonlight Brook. That was something that definitely was discussed that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if that's something that eventually happens, then great.
Well,
Right. And also the idea is that the hardening, we have to protect what's hardened to protect the park, but we may be able to permit it so that we can create the living shoreline aspect, the natural aspects are going to be alterations potentially through, that would require permitting to what was out in front of there. That was the nature of what the conversation, because of the constraints of an urban park. But I think that's what makes it kind of interesting to a lot of the professionals, is you have these constraints because it's an urban park, but you are trying to achieve a lot of the system benefits of a more resilient but natural shoreline.
Exactly, and I think where we may score well in this, say if we do the living shoreline, is we have that charrette. So I'm looking at the timeline right now, and part of this is the scoring is like community involvement, and public support. So we put in that application. This grant timeline doesn't start till between October 23 and January 24. So whenever the executive council signs off on it, so that's when our clock starts, and then we must complete the project by June 30th, 2025. So I think if we were to, wherever we target with this grant, whether it be H&H or Living Shoreline, saying that we're having this design charrette for public information to gather, understand how what the park's going to look like, or understand it better. Once we understand it better, we can input that information into a preliminary design more.
Right.
So I think that it kind of works out potentially in our favor.
Right.
It may.
Yeah, it may.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good. I think it's good we're continue to have these meetings, because we now we have more information. It may work well, and again, I think for the amount of money to just update what has been done, it may be that the most sensible thing to do is to see if Steve can find some money from within town funds to do a little additional engineering work in the near term to keep all the other parts of it moving along, if there isn't another source to find it from right now.
Steve was thinking that Amy Rec has money for parks, that maybe we'll use some of the money from there for a study or whatever.
Right, because some of the other parts of improving the park we might find grant for it later on. So if that's the thing that we need to do to keep everything going, we should, and there's not a grant opportunity and it's not a lot of money, because I think what Kyle was sort of telling us is, where we invest some of the town's own money in some of this progress, that is strengthening our grant applications. It's not like we're only doing what somebody else pays for. We're actually continuing to invest in that.
And if that's kind of the match aspect that the grant requires, at least show, that classic skin in the game concept that the town's willing to put something up. Kind of like I had mentioned in that meeting. I mean, that was something the town was ready to support if we had been selected 2 years ago or whenever it was that we had put in the first time.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot has changed since then, so I do like our chances better this time around.
Right, and I think that it's kind of becoming, the project's both becoming smaller and bigger at the same time. It's smaller in that we're clearly focused in Shanda Park, but it's bigger in that there's all these other aspects that Lindsay's very involved in that are kind of, MS4 and Moonlight and all of that. It was not the core of this, but it has to work alongside. The two have to be brought along together, otherwise it just won't make sense.
Agreed. Yeah, Bart, if you or Lindsay, whoever has time, can attend Monday. I think that's probably the question: is where are we best focused here? Is this for the H&H stormwater planning aspect? Is that better suited for the clean water SRF? Is this the living shoreline?
Or this living shoreline angle.
Yeah, just how do we collectively want to use it? So with that coming or being due in May and the SRF stuff kind of in June, and then maybe playing New Hampshire in the fall, these are kind of starting to condense a little bit on top of each other, which actually may be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
All right. Any kind of further discussion or questions about the coastal resilience grant?
No, I think you guys are kind of noodling about out of that. I think the other thing we were going to talk about this meeting, if I remember right, was that we were thinking we kind of needed to start getting our heads around potential, talk about again when we think the charrette might be happening.
Yep.
And what kind of materials we want to have ready to present to the public so that we can
Definitely.
frame those discussions. And
So that is next on the agenda. I guess I'll detour back real quick to just pick up. We had also talked about doing a letter of support from the committee for that. Obviously, we have a little bit more time than we thought initially. But I mean, does this thing really have to be more than two sentences that say, well, we as the committee are aware of this?
With this for the coastal resiliency grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been bugging Kyle to have him send some kind of
Okay, so
some
just
templates.
he'll send
Yeah,
something and
exactly.
we'll sign on to
So I
it.
think since this got sent out, he'll
Okay.
do that. So.
No, sounds good. Because
Yeah.
if it was really just two sentences, it's like we're aware of this and support the general goals and we'll provide time and input as required. Then we could
Yeah.
also just write it.
Yep. I'll see what he has, and then if it's something along the lines,
Okay. Nice. Yeah, just didn't want that to get lost
Nope.
in the shuffle, but it seems less dire from a time perspective than it did
then,
last time we talked.
And again, I'll have to look into it, but this is only the applications you made 26.
Okay. No, that's good. All right, we'll wait to hear if he's gonna send one out that we can copy from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I guess the next and frankly final thing that was really on the agenda was that conversation. We'd kind of touched upon it at the end of the last meeting, but yeah, just what are we collectively presenting at the charrette? And Bart, I guess I'm kind of glad that you're here today, because I mean, what are we presenting? This is definitely an oversight area for me. I know how to run a PowerPoint, but like the graphic design and the how do you get visual information across to people in a useful way? This is kind of outside of my knowledge base and comfort zone.
Not to interrupt, but going back to what I remember a little bit, the thing that I think about is there were a lot of discussions about things like what is adequately for a functional, as we start to think about what we think the culvert project is going to do to Moonlight Brook, and what we think the MS4 aspects of it, and try to look at those preliminary plans we had from Living Shoreline. I think we need to think of, we would want to be at the point we get to this fall, we'd like to be able to think, well, what is the width of the boat landing going to be? What do we need to kind of gather information about, so that, are we going to try to move the kayak-related activity, make sure they're closer to the boat ranch so that they can also there, and they're not, impacting the fragile living shoreline type areas, because that was a concern about storage in places the kayak shouldn't be stored and dragging them up and across there. But I'm sorry I did miss the January meeting, and I wasn't here where Amy was here talking about but I think she has very strong opinions about what how to make sure the park is functional. So if we kind of had a way of thinking about the recreational needs of that plot and the changes that may be required to make it cleaner, better, more resilient, more natural, and what we've already heard from the living shorelines people, but try to take a look at that and say that here's what needs to be integrated. Because a lot, I think we've got quite a bit of information about that, but I'm not sure. It seems like we've got to think about some of the choices we have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so we've touched upon this a couple times, and I'm kind of thumbing back through the notes of when we've touched upon it, but really this whole concept of Shanda Park and stuff has really fallen into, I'm just going to wing a number, like 10 or 12 kind of buckets of like items that we're talking about. And some of these buckets are very big, like the culvert and the outfall or a living shoreline, and some of them are relatively small about like, do we change where the kayak launch point is and what does that look like? But I do see kind of some recurring concepts. I also know that we wanted to shoot for some bigger things, like does the town envision any desire or palette for having a bridge over the Lamprey River?
Increased connectivity.
Yeah, increased connectivity, some larger concepts. So like I guess that's both my hope and my fear lies in how do we kind of show people some more of these concepts in a way that they can understand what might be being proposed and provide input. But also I don't necessarily think the fear side of that is I don't want to get lost in an hour discussion about how long a potential like kayak launch dock would be when there's more critical questions like, do you want a living shoreline or potentially a bridge to connect to Heron Point?
So the people, step in there for a second, the help that comes with the design charrette, you're going to be expertise of the engineers, of the, landscape architects, whatnot, whole cornucopia of, experts, and they'll provide conceptual plans based on what they hear. It's like, oh, maybe you can put it here.
They will?
Yeah.
That's part of it?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
man,
they provide a final document basically based on everything that they heard at the charrette and produce it and give it to us. Like, this is what we heard, this is where you think you need to focus, and here's a plan that you can move forward. Well, you say conceptual plan you can move forward with to, refine in more detail.
Because what I'm thinking about when I recognize what we've talked about, I think one of the things that we could be focusing on as a committee, because nobody else is going to do, I think Lindsay and the stormwater, other parts of the town will get into the much of the nuts and bolts of that. And I think the living shoreline is very much something we hope we can do, and it will make a lot of things work well with some of the partners we're trying to work with. But I think we need to say, like I know we've talked about before, and I can't remember the answer, are we totally unencumbered as we would set about trying to make changes to the boat launch area? What are our encumbrances there? I think there were, and Mike is somebody that knows a lot of this history, so it'll be helpful when he's back because he understands that real well. Yeah. But we ought to make sure we capture some of this in a document so that things we learn we have saved, and it can, and then we can start to say, I think this generally we think that functionally that boat launch probably doesn't need to be as wide, or it either doesn't need to be as wide, or some of that width could be used for kayaks and some for boats. But it definitely needs some work. It's a mess, but we need to make sure it's done in a more, you can't just dump stuff out there, and there's got to be
Right, so there needs to be more analysis on how to do that, and that's what this document will allow for the justification for more analysis. Basically, what it's going to show, there's, we'll say there's more community support to understand how we can improve the boat launch, and so that therefore you can use that document as justification to request more funds, more analyses on how to do it. That's what it is. It's really showing what the community wants more than details.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I think it's going to show when it comes to, to Sam's point, I think whether or not, if we heard overwhelmingly that they didn't care about a living shoreline, they just want to harden it up. Well, it may not be what we think we wanted here, but I mean, at least
Well, it's important.
It's important to people to weigh in at that point on that.
Exactly. So, in that scenario, it's like, okay, what does harden mean in their case? And then you have that conversation moving forward and how, find that compromise between, reality of living shoreline and then, traditional uses of a urban waterfront.
Right. A lot of people may not know that, all the time we had this meeting on the living shoreline aspect, they were asked early on, is it understood that this will flood periodically in the future? And we said, yes, we didn't expect to raise this beyond.
Yeah. I mean, it floods now, so.
It floods now. We're not really looking to raise the elevation. We're certainly not looking to lose elevation for the main usable part of the park, but we're not looking to raise elevation to prevent that.
Yeah.
So I think in preparation for the design charrette, what I'll be doing, and I'll probably work with Amy on this, and then the Arts and Tourism Committee as well. Basically going out there and surveying people during Arts in the Park and the Tuesday night shows that they have down there, music, concerts. Basically reaching out to people and understanding, kind of doing that early legwork on how you want to use this. How do you envision using Shanda Park? What would you like to see here? And then having that data, and then when it comes time for the charrette, that maybe that introduction at the charrette, we give a small PowerPoint. Say, hey, this is what we've heard so far. Here's the origin of how we got here. Here's what data we collected on opinions thus far, and it kind of shows maybe these are the buckets that we're hearing, and then from there continuing the conversation at the charrette, and then afterwards the charrette will produce a document based on all the data and listening sessions that occurred in that process.
So the elements of it, as far as Shanda Park per se, that we would be talking about at the charrette is about how you integrate changes with parking, with potentially the changes that are going to be driven by MS4 are going to be driven by stormwater, nitrogen, all of that, but they will drive some of the considerations of what the boat landing leads into Shanda Park, leads into the parking area. All that we won't have all of the engineering done before that, but we'll be telling people that here are the constraints and some of the things that will be impacted by other processes ongoing, right?
Yeah, and I think at that point you tell them what the committee has been working on so far. How do we get to this point? This is what we're thinking, and then starting that conversation with the community. People not attending these meetings, so the majority of town probably has no idea what we're talking about. So this is an opportunity to reach out to so many more people and invite them into that conversation, so that this committee can make really salient recommendations to town council on how to proceed.
Will we be showing any of the, because we had them once when Amy had one of her meetings, she had us bring out the actual drawings that the Living Shoreline Design Group had done. do you plan to incorporate some of that level of work? Not saying that actually represents where we'll be, but sort of some of the work that was presented. And are you going to present that at the charrette? Do you
Yeah, I think we can have that. We can have it on the easel. Definitely put it in the PowerPoint on when we tell the origin story of how we got here. The committee has gotten there. So this is how it all started after town council created the committee, and show that, and then how it's led to where to the charrette and everything in between. So putting all those documents together, and all those what we have, and presenting it, describing it, and then so everyone has the information on what has been done so far, and they can think if that's something they want to support further.
Who within, besides Mike, who's no longer within the town, who has the most information about what, like the boat landing? Is that something that Rick really would have some knowledge? Who would really understand what constraints we work under, and how, has a kind of an understanding of what's.
Yeah, I personally don't know. Mike obviously knows a lot. Something that's been brought up, I think, both kind of between this committee and the Conservation Commission, is just the overlap in general that exists with Shannon Park, between it being a Conservation Commission property that's owned by the town, that has public works feature, that is very much a park as well, and just that everyone kind of interacts with it and kind of does some stuff with it, but no one, I think, owns it or is responsible for it outright. And just I think there's a lot of good intention, but
It's complex.
who actually owns and leads decisions on Shannon Park? Is that the town, and through town council as a general? I'm literally asking.
I think it's conservation.
Yeah, and like it is. Well, I think it's town-owned land that the Conservation Commission manages. So it's like.
What will be the difference between that and Heron Point?
Better question probably for Ellen,
Yeah.
because she's done a lot more on the deeds than I have. But
Because that's conservation land in general.
yeah.
So I guess it depends on how it's deeded.
And that's the thing of like, it's a Conservation Commission property, but is it owned by the town? Like, does the Conservation Commission volunteers, are we responsible to go out and maintain it? Well, it doesn't seem to be like what's been done. It's been like a town thing. So like, I think that's part of the problem with these things, is like, we want there to be someone who knows and owns that complete, but I'm not sure if anyone actually does. I think everyone has a say and wants to be helpful with it, but no one's leading the charge.
Right. I think we've got minutes, but I do think we need to kind of also, parallel to the minutes that we've been working on, we also need to have a document where we capture what we know about something at any point. Maybe we have some of that, but like, because we've had, my memory's not that good. I know we've had conversation about, do we need to engage with Fish and Game about what can happen at the boat launch? And so if we're going to have a fall charrette, we definitely need to be able to identify what do we need to have, so we know what next steps would be about anything that we plan to do, that we think we need to know more about before we can decide to do anything. I'm saying, what are our constraints around the Fish and Game, around the boat launch? I got the feeling that I'm definitely under the impression that the last thing I heard is that we don't necessarily, the Fish and Game isn't going to, since we didn't add a lot more parking, they're neither going to be a source of a lot more funds, nor are they particularly going to tell us what we can and can't do there. But I think it would be good to document that and see if we need to have a conversation. Because I know, for one thing, if we think that new Fish and Game doesn't have a lot more to tell us about that, we should make sure that they think they don't have a lot more to tell us about that before we go too far down that road.
I agree, and that's been the last 20 minutes I've been staring at this one sheet of paper, primarily from when we talked with the Great Bay Living Shoreline folks, because I really feel like that's been this committee's probably most in-depth meeting, where we were also able to get the most amount of feedback. I mean, really having Sean, Amy, and Rick also in attendance for that one. So
I'm glad you had those notes, by the way.
Kind of what's coming to my mind is really touching upon what you just answered. I do feel like we may almost need to put together like a document. I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not manifesto. That's clearly the wrong thing. But like almost an aggregation of like, okay, these are the general topics we've discussed. These are the portions of the work that keep coming up. These are the things that we want. But there may be some kind of thought organization that needs to occur as we all just kind of collectively are trying to set the groundwork for the charrette. What do we know? What do we not know? And then, I hate giving people like homework, but almost from there, what do we need to figure out between now and then? And
right.
And is there a way to kind of divide this up amongst not, the committee and Bart and Lindsay of who can dig into this a little bit more and maybe get some answers so that we have as much of this stuff kind
so
of
that we can collect a set of documents.
answered up front.
And if what we can answer before the charrette, fine. But
Yeah.
if there's things out there that we can quickly just go ask somebody and learn,
Yeah.
we should do those things, and then we can have a lot more productive charrette when we look at
Yeah, and again, we'll just use the boat launch we've brought up a couple times today. So like the boat launch may be a minor concept in relation to literally a bridge to Heron Point, but questions about the boat launch. Well, what are you talking about doing? How much narrower could it be? Like these are all kind of like pointless if we can't actually change anything because of all this stuff. So
Right.
yeah, like I think it's just okay, when we talk about these topics, what are we truly talking about, and what do we know right now, and
Right.
probably more importantly, what do we need to find out?
what can we find out that really creates more certainty about what our constraints are. If we're certain of that our constraints are real constraints, then we'll have to figure out how to operate with those as we go to the design phase. Because I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about them for the living shoreline and the aspects of it, but the part that we expect to actually be breaking ground, doing things, and it will be actionable first is the Shanda Park. I think it would be nice as well to start to have to advance, yay or nay, the concepts of a pedestrian bridge more. And by its very definition, the idea of a pedestrian bridge implies that we're going to understand the Riverwalk part of things better too. And I think that will be something that everybody's going to be wanting to understand. What are we talking about? What might be possible? I think that goes back to the very beginning, is understanding that as well. And we've got, Rivermore is more engaged now. We can start to have a preliminary kind of discussion about if we were going to move in that direction, what would Rivermore really be delighted to see happen out in their dooryard, and what would need to happen from a town standpoint to justify towns spending the money to make improvements along there.
I agree complete, and so I'm willing to try to start spending some time to cull through some of this stuff and at least give us a starting point for that document of this is all the stuff we frankly talked about and what we know and maybe don't know. But yeah, I mean, Bart, whatever direction we can give these guys when they show up, because I think I think everything needs to get discussed in some fact. But if we have professionals and true time, like I'd like to talk about like a bridge more than like a boat launch or like a kayak dock or something, like the big concepts, the things that would really involve a lot of time and capital and go far beyond the scope of this advisory committee if they were going to be pursued by the town.
At the charrette, you
Yeah,
mean? You would
like I feel like those.
It sounds like what I'm hearing is the committee wants more to do a lot of the understanding what the community wants and bring those major concepts to the design charrette already and to advance them.
Like anything. I mean, and any info, because it's just, and maybe this will come into focus over the next month or two as we kind of continue to drill into this. But it still feels like there's a lot being talked about through all of these kind of things that we've looked at, and
But it's only been the committee talking.
it's only been us talking about it. Who's really known anything? Like,
Well,
and how do we not? How do we get answers on everything that matters, but not spend the same amount of time talking about where people are going to drag their kayaks up if there's a living shoreline as we do about would you want to invest in a major piece of infrastructure over the Lamprey River?
I think it's more having those, when we get to the design, the charrette, it's not going to the nitty gritty, it's more big picture.
Yeah.
And then
How are you engaging?
so you got community support over, 5 things that they want to see in Shannon Park. Then you go into the nitty gritty about, the size of the boat landing, say if that's one of them, or where the bridge is going to be, how to, extend the river, the boardwalk or river walk maybe. So it's really, understanding what the community wants, then going off that list and diving into the details.
So in a way, when you say you have 5 questions, you want to have people be able to kind of give feedback in, or whatever the number is when you have that meeting. It's the same things we're talking about here. We identify what are the things, I mean, because to me, it's really important that we get some feedback on, they may be small things, but it's real important we have feedback, because Shanda Park, we hope to be able to incorporate feedback and understanding early on, so that we start to put grant proposals forward that
It's
are really
more
gonna,
actionable than anything
Right.
else.
But at the same time, I think it's also important to get at least early feedback about not so much any design of a pedestrian bridge, it's really about the concept of a pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
Do people think that that's gonna be a worthwhile goal?
Yeah. Do you want it? Does everyone hate it, or is everyone like,
Right.
hey, that sounds really cool?
Right.
I don't think we even know the answer to that question.
Right. No, I don't think it's that. And anytime the conversations I've had with people, I know, some people are like, oh, that sounds like a nice thing. And other people are like, why would we do that? And it's really, I couldn't tell you what the majority.
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought it up to a handful, like literally maybe 5 people, and everyone was pro, but like, based on what?
And
based on me saying, hey, would it be kind of cool if there was a bridge over here?
There
Like,
may
I
be
don't
the
know.
age demographic you're bringing it up to. I mean, I just.
No idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody would be behind things that involve taking what we have there and make sure it's well maintained, it's going to last, it's improve the design. Everybody's going to be behind that. And I think that extends to some concept, because people do presently use that walking area up there, and it's getting run down. So
Yeah.
all of that area, and I think, so we can tighten up the concepts around that, be ready for the charrette, and, figure out what we don't know that we should start to know within the next 6 to 10 months or something. And then as far as the good news about something like the bridge is we don't really have to have much of a concept there. Your concept of the bridge is, what do you like better? Trying to make it go to the downriver location or the upriver location. And maybe we don't want to ask that question unless we kind of go back and capture, because I think we talked about, if I remember right, was it going to be a whole lot harder to permit it if it was downriver from the boat landing where it's got to be really high? Maybe that's not even really, if that's going to be so hard to do, we should just not ask the public if they like that idea.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, I would just say, would you support connectivity to Heron Point?
Yeah.
From downtown.
And I that is the central question.
Yeah.
I think we probably want to at least be open enough that that is in the form of literally a bridge, because, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is what we're discussing.
Yeah, so you could say, for example, via a bridge or an easement,
Yeah.
land easement. Just give them both options, because that's basically options, two options.
Yeah.
And then have that discussion from there.
Yeah.
What that looks like.
Right, and you can bring a map in there and you can say, I mean, at this point in time, you could say, people have talked about doing it down here, people have talked about up here. We haven't explored it enough to tell you what's feasible yet, but.
That's exactly what they're gonna do. They're gonna, I envision have a map of the, area of interest downtown, and then as ideas pop up, they're gonna pin. They're gonna show, visually, geographically, what ideas, where they're located, and, what they are, so.
Would it be a benefit to us and Amy and some others to actually go down there and have a meeting down there and just point out, say, hey, this can be made smaller, or made bigger, the kayak thing should go here, bridge should go over there?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have that internally, and what makes, from the town perspective, but again, we won't know what the public, so I think,
But to have
we'll have that information, say,
what we think we want to do, then you show it to the public and say, here's what we're thinking of doing.
no,
Certainly, we could have one of our, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be televised, but we could have one of our Riverfront meetings coming up. I think that will be, I think what we're doing right now is really an important part of being ready for the fall in terms of, and if you want to divvy up some homework to look on some things, but I think that would be, that's really what we need, is to kind of capture what we've been talking about and move it forward a little further.
Yeah, I'm willing to kind of get started on this. I mean, it may take a little bit to get together, but I think have something that we can all kind of access and start from a little bit. I think that may be useful.
Yeah.
Bart, I think the last question I have for you is, the town going to get a chance to talk to the people kind of running the charrette, like, beforehand? Like, I know that obviously yes, but like, will we have a chance to have a working session with them? Just so they kind of know what this stuff is.
Yep, definitely, we can, set that up, so. Typically we'll have like a meeting on how, because part of it too is, finding accommodations for some people, for the people, participating. So, so there will be a lot of logistical work beforehand, and meanwhile, we can have that conversation on, what else should the town be doing in preparation for.
And when you think about when you think this is going to happen, where do you kind of see this?
I would say maybe September, October. That's what I envision.
Yeah.
Well, physically, like, room downstairs.
Could be that. I could talk to Amy, see if there's any opportunity for any recreation buildings that we could use. Something, maybe the school, maybe we'll work with the school, maybe go to the gym. So it's gonna be in the weekend anyways. So I can talk to the school district and see if there's an opportunity for us to use any of their facilities.
And when do you think it would be important for us to start working with an actual date to run by this? How far are we from actually trying to pick a date on this stuff?
Yeah, a little bit. So I would say in a month or two we'll hammer down the date.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll advance it a little bit because our next meeting is 4 weeks from now. Is that right?
Yeah.
I feel like we've kind of settled into like second Monday of the month, which doesn't seem like a bad idea.
That popped up automatically, so that's on my calendar, so that's good.
Yeah, which would be
Pick that.
April 10th.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll have more information on that then.
I do think that, I don't think I'm misremembering this. I do think that Pam from the Arts and Tourism Committee that came to one of our meetings, and asked if I could maybe go to one of theirs. I think the one they asked was for April 11th. So we can talk about that next time too, but I think right after our next meeting, I would plan to show up at one of theirs. See what questions they have.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing to try to consolidate your notes, Sam. I think it's at that point where we've got to identify remaining questions that we know we won't, the questions we know we won't know before we try to do the charrette, and the things that we think we could meaningfully advance if we could find ways to divide the work and or at least find, ask other committees to weigh in on some of these things, or find out ways to engage some other groups to.
I think that's it. We have talked a lot for a very long time about a lot of these parts.
Yes.
I think it's how do we condense this in a way that other people can weigh in on it effectively. I think that is becoming an important thing for us as a committee to answer. So I'm willing to take the first crack, but then from there, yeah, definitely look for input, because
One other thing, do we want to take on Chicks Weir, the future of that?
I think we want to document what the situation is, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think to be abundantly clear on that, some of the concepts being discussed for the park would change how that operates, for sure, including storage and inlet and outlet. It has been discussion at the town level amongst many committees for quite a while. I don't think the ultimate authority lives or dies with us by any means, but I think it's absolutely something that has to be
Included in the
acknowledged
Right.
and discussed potentially as part of the shred even. I don't know, but
Right. I mean, I think that we need to, I'm picturing a document that says, here is the person in the town most directly responsible for the decisions about boat landing, weir,
yeah,
et cetera. What are other things that are purely conceptual and are in our, like when it comes to, is the pedestrian bridge a popular idea or not? I don't feel like we have anybody else in the town that we have to go to work other than with Bart and the charrette. That's really up to us. On these other things, the weir, the landing, everything else, like we got to figure out who is it that really is closest to making to being a decision maker within the town, and have we fully engaged with them?
and I do think that's important. As much as we try to do the homework, and ultimately we'll provide information so that town council and Steve can make decisions. It ultimately isn't us. So how do we connect the people who will ultimately make a decision on that with the information that's been gathered and discussed?
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's like, we know it. It's a complicated park. It has multiple functions, a great deal of popularity. It's very important. We have grander ideas of where this may lie, and a lot of people have input and knowledge about that, and we just got to find a way to bring it so that we don't get started down some road and find out we're totally disconnected from the main.
Yep, absolutely. All right, today is March 14th. I will set a personal intention to try to have a draft of something together, say within the next 2 weeks. And then that just allows people potentially 2 weeks to just kind of look at what I put together, see if it matches your understanding, have comments, thoughts, just anything you want to talk
Is
about.
there something you'd like me to help you with or do?
That answer is absolutely yes. And from this point,
Good direction though.
yeah, from this point on, I have taken a lot of notes and I've kept pretty much all of them. So I think I'm well suited for this initial thing. From that point, I think it will be a lot more successful if I am a smaller part of that. I find my time to be
I would say
very
the
limited.
next thing is that we take that, and I always have a lot to say, and I haven't produce much, so I will be the first to acknowledge that, but I would try to take that and say, okay, when I look at this and see what we've already done, what do I remember about that? What do I think are the next steps? What do I think, and be prepared to make notes on your document so that when we come to that, we can really kind of break new ground in terms of next steps and stuff.
Would it be helpful to have some kind of template that the board can have to jot down notes? Just so, and then we can compile it afterwards into I think what Dale's suggestion is like that, what we talk about.
Yeah, I was thinking of basically starting it as a Word document. I'm not a technological person, but I know for work when we write like reports where we know like 8 to 10 people are going to be writing at any given time, we put them on like OneDrive or something that's acceptable that anyone can just access and go into. So
Yeah, I think that's fine for now. I think certainly by next meeting I mean, who else? Is there anybody? It would be great if Lindsay's there at the next meeting, probably just to get a report, or you can get a report from where things are with the Moonlight Brook parts of things. But I feel like that part of the project is moving away from us to things Lindsay's working on anyways. But
it may be.
if you can just confirm that that's kind of those grants and everything else, or maybe she'll come next time and we can just kind of leave it at that. And because there was a little bit of new ground at this one. And then after that, we got to figure out, how long is Mike going to be gone? Is he coming? I'm trying to remember. Do you remember, Joe, how long he was?
He was leaving today, so I assume he'd be back next month.
Okay, that will be
I
handy.
don't know that for a fact.
But then, do we, I think then that will be fine. We'll see what the document, with what you have, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. I don't, because by the time we meet next time, we should be saying, okay, here are the things that we're going to endeavor to understand better by the time we get to the charrette, and here's what we need to get there. If we can map that out at next meeting, I think we'll.
Yeah, I think this would be a good template for that discussion, and I'm kind of willing to suspend a lot of talk until after getting that together. But I think that's probably what would be most useful. Is I don't mind aggregating this because I think I have it basically all on hand. From there, between you sitting on the council, you having been involved with it, Bart and Lindsay being involved in the town, I think other people will be more effective agents of the knowledge and the delegation and the getting that input and making sure people agree with stuff from there. But this first step, I don't mind taking that on.
And can I ask, are you from Rivermore?
Yes,
Okay, I thought you were, and I know I've met you before. But
yes.
And what is your name?
Betsy Wolf.
And Betsy, are you somebody that's going to be kind of more, are you just coming to this meeting, or do you think you're going to be coming to more meetings, or?
Probably coming to more meetings.
And do you want to be on the kid committee?
Well, we'll have to see.
Okay, fair, that's a smart answer.
Fair response. It's my favorite answer. I always say it depends.
Yeah.
It's my favorite work answer.
Do you have any reactions to our discussions from today so far? I'd be curious.
Well, I'm curious about this whole concept of the pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
Do you mind coming from the microphone so I don't get in trouble again? Now that we're official on TV.
So I guess I, have some concerns about the bridge and how this whole concept came about. I definitely appreciate the committee's attention to connect Great Heron Point, to figure out some method of connectivity, because I think that's a great resource for the community to have. I would like them to explore an option that maybe is a little bit more financially responsible. Perhaps something similar to the Freedom Trail that they have in Boston, where you actually have a trail through the sidewalks of downtown that maybe has an outline of a heron that will guide people to how to actually use recreation and to use walking in order to get, through the downtown and maybe widen a sidewalk along Bay Road and get an easement through the mobile home park to get people to get to Heron Park. And that can certainly be something that can be developed with maybe QR codes that point out certain things that people can see along the way. My concern with the pedestrian bridge is that I really feel that it's going to be a nuisance. I think it's going to impact the boating capabilities, because you have to recognize you've got an 8 to 10 foot tide twice a day, and boats that have sailboats are going to need to be able to clear that, because they typically go out when the tide is high so that they're not dragging motors and rudders and stuff along the way. I also think that pedestrian bridges are going to be an attractive nuisance for people. Unless it's gated in some way, you're going to have people that are constantly crossing. What are you going to do about teenagers or other people just hanging out? Do you really want them over at Heron Park at 2 o'clock in the morning? You have to think about that. I don't know if any of you live on water or have lived on water. We've lived on a body of water for almost 40 years, and conversations carry. So you might be talking very quietly as you're passing in a canoe or something, but I can tell you, we can hear everything that is said on the river, in Heron Point, at Rivermore on the riverside. So complicate that with a bridge in which you've got people constantly crossing at all hours of the night. It's going to be a nuisance. So I can actually say that I appreciate the committee's involvement in trying to connect a great resource that we have at Great Heron Point, but I feel like they need to do something other than a bridge. I also will say that I don't know how frequently everybody walks along the river or visits Shanda's Park, but certainly the complications were explained this evening, where the town owns it, but the Conservation Committee maintains it. It's in a shambles. It really is. There's weeds, there's bricks falling apart. The Rosa Ragusa on the other side of the bridge has not been maintained. And I'm concerned that this committee is going to be taking on another beautification attempt when they can't even maintain what they've got now. So, Shanda Park, we've been here 7 years. Shanda Park was lovely when we first moved here, but it's not been maintained. It's not weeded, it's not raked, it's
Yeah,
not.
I think those all need, while I'm at it though, what do you think of the idea of, there is a river walk function that goes along in front of Riverfront.
Yeah,
now.
yes.
And
Well, and I would say 95% of the people that come through there respect it. But we do have people where, dog waste is a big problem. It's like that throughout all of the town. We have, on Rivermore, we have 2 areas where that we support with our own, association money, where people can grab waste, for their dog waste and actually put it there, and it's emptied 3 times a week, and it's overflowing 3 times a week. But that still doesn't mean that everybody is using it. We do have people that sometimes, that is private property. All those tables and such along the river that are there is private property. That dock that's there is private property, and yet we do have people going out there, sitting there, which is fine. But when other residents are trying to come out and utilize their space, utilize our space, that's sometimes a problem. So,
Right.
So as long as people come and respect the property, that's, we don't mind them passing through. But when they sit and take up residence for a while, interfering with other people's use of our property, I think that's something that we have to contend with and find a solution for.
Right.
So, and again, that's just my personal opinion. But,
Well,
there are 77 owners in that building.
Yeah.
You've got 35 in Bay Road. You've got the new I mean, even though it's apartments, you've now got 15, 17 new apartments in the new Cheney building. You've got all the apartments that are in the Chimberg building and those businesses there. So I think you really need to take into everybody's consideration on how a bridge specifically will impact, their ability to live peacefully. So.
I think you probably heard it here. Where we are right now, I would say.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The worst-
Listen, we just put that bridge in. I don't know if you noticed that Rivermore had put a new bridge in. That was about 4 years in the making of trying to get that bridge in. So I can't even imagine, I really understand where you are in that whole bridge concept, but I think trying to connect that over to Great Heron, I think that's a great idea. But I think there's other ways to do it that's more economically feasible than a bridge.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would encourage. I mean, this is a great place to have that conversation. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but I was on the dam committee, and on the dam committee we dealt with Bryant Rock, and that was very productive early on to have that as be part. And I consider this very similar because from talking to Gretchen, I know that every you would certainly want what the town has a responsibility for. You want there to be an interest. You'd like everybody to be engaged in doing the maintenance that's going to make it attractive down there to maintain, to help your property look better.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And it's so, in order for us, we're certainly the residents in general are going to be more interested in that if they feel like they have some use of those areas.
Right.
Which they do now. We just got to find a way to make it work.
Right. The picnicking areas. And my husband and I came from Derry, where we lived for over 30 years. We were very involved with the downtown program there, the various charrettes for our school building issues. I was on the school building committee there. I was on strategic planning for school committees there. So we're very familiar with the process that needs to occur. And the need to get a lot of involvement from a lot of people from all different areas, people who live on the river, people who don't live on the river, people who are visiting Newmarket. I think that's just as important, because Newmarket is a huge draw for a lot of people that, want to just come, have a nice meal, have a leisure walk. So I think it's important in many different
Downtown restaurants are important to
Absolutely.
all of our quality of life, and they certainly like things that attract people to the town.
Exactly. So anyway,
So thank you for sharing your input.
So anyway, I hope that helps. But I think there's a lot that can be done to increase the space down there. And I'm also very familiar with the coastal living, area, resiliency and stuff. And I feel like there's different degrees as to how that can go about. I definitely think, plantings can help with the filtering, natural plantings and stuff. But I think there's different levels of how you can go with that. But and keep in mind too, flooding is going to be a problem. So whatever goes in there has to be able to withstand elevated water, flooding and stuff. So anyway. All right.
Sure you don't want to join this?
She didn't say no yet.
I didn't say no.
Didn't say no.
She didn't say
Didn't hear no.
I didn't say no. But,
I definitely didn't hear no.
Yeah, but anyway, so, yeah.
I don't know, if somebody was at the door there. She just looked in maybe.
No, and I think we can kind of call it for today, but that is the perspective and what I think a charrette is going to be extremely helpful for, because I know personally I've always viewed it as, well, I like to go downtown, it'd be great to walk over there, or, bringing people to town, but at the end of the day, I have the benefit if I can leave.
Yeah.
That's not the case for you. So I think that's where the input comes in, is everyone's perspective does need to be heard.
Right.
Great. I'll make a motion to adjourn until our next meeting on April 10th.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
Cool. All in favor if we have to vote on that?
No, I don't think we have to vote, but
Good. All right, I think we're all set, Tim. Thank you much.